backwards culture theory. And of course, this is mostly about the Black community because you see the melanin, you see the skin. I don't have a lot of time on my hands today, so I'm just going to get right into it. So I broke this down, this backwards culture theory, into 3 different categories: religion, African American relationships, and nature. African American society, a lot of people that are religious or spiritual grew up in Christian households. A lot of the teachings were based on fear, but there's a reason for that. Examples of this would be sex shaming. And the reason I thought about this is because a lot of times growing up, we were taught that, the nature of humans, which is to have sex, was shameful and something that you don't do and it's dirty and disgusting. And there was a reason why they made this based on fear, because studies show that cultural shame has way more impact on a person's psyche than physical pain, because it's mental stimulation that matters first. This separates the truth from the reality. The truth is that it's in our nature to have sex. The truth is that we have cycles on which we have sex. But our reality is that you can be greatly shamed for this, and it holds back a lot of it represses a lot of people's sexual energy. Now, before we go too deep, I want y'all to understand that this is not to bash culture or religion, because this is actually very beneficial to society, and is the reason why a lot of other cultures are successful in building generational wealth, because they follow religions. So I want you guys to take this this information and do what you will with it. Don't use this as a means to pick one side or the other. Get out in life, explore different cultures, and understand what works for what, depending on your goal, because studies show that people that are religious have more of a way greater chance of building generational wealth. Move on to our next point. African American relationships. Now, this is very interesting because we always hear a lot of YouTube channels and we hear a lot of high value men and high value women speak about the difference of these relationships. But I want to break it down so that you can understand the dynamics of the relationships, because the two people don't matter if the dynamics aren't there, no matter what those dynamics may be. So we have a very great amount of domestic violence. Now, I'm going to put this paper down and be real with y'all. We've always had issues with domestic violence. But the difference is that back in the day, it was normalized because women were seen as property. And we know that, right? So even with the European women, with the Caucasian women, with different races of women, they also experienced domestic violence. But because it was illegal for Black people to marry, this was actually a crime, because that was more of a reason for a Black man to be in prison. But a white man, back in the day, abusing his wife was seen as him making use of his property. A man beating his wife, that was seen as making use of property. And I'm gonna just give y'all warning on this, because this is triggering for a lot of people and it doesn't make it right. I'm just breaking down the history and the psychology of it so that you can take this information to better your life and your understanding of society and your goals and what you want to do in life. Okay, stay with me here. So this whole thing became a big divide because it was a cultural norm for European white women to be submissive, because they had to be obedient to the man, because they understood their place in society as property. The Black woman was never put in a place of high society back in the day. And I'm going to keep saying back in the day because I want y'all to understand that, where we are now is so much more further than where we are back then. But stay with me. Black women were never put in a high place of society, so we never had the chance to be submissive. We were forced to submit through labor and hard work to slave masters, but Black women were never taught to submit to Black men. So that's where we have this giant cultural divide right now, because men are expecting something from women that women were never able to give, and women are expected something from men that the men were never able to give. That brings me to my point of our relationships are backwards within the Black community, because whereas in European standards and white standards, it was seen as you're going to get married, you're going to have a baby, you're going to build a foundation and pass on generational wealth. Now, our culture is backwards because what we do is our man, a lot of times, and this is me speaking to nature and culture, this is not a personal opinion, these are facts. Men make women earn their spot. Specifically, black women are seen as having to earn their spot with black men. And you want to know why? It all boils down to the history and the slavery of it. Because back in the day, a lot of times black women were not able to be relied upon to not tell on a black man, because she didn't want to sacrifice her children and she had to become the protector of her children. So there was never that trust. They weren't able to build a foundation because it was illegal to be married. So we never, ever touched the foundation of what societal norms were in marriage. And now fast forward 2024, we are in these gender battles because we're expected to uphold these standards, because now we have the freedom, but we never had the foundation. Let me say that one more time. We are expected to hold up these cultural norms and understanding, but we never had the foundation, but now we have the freedom. So what does that do? Back in the day, white women they didn't need to go to school. They didn't need to, and I'm not saying this, once again, I'm not saying this as a good or bad thing, because this was actually an ideal life and this was accepted into their society. And that's where submission comes in. They accepted their role and their place in society. Whereas now with black women, we were never taught to have a certain place in society. And now that men are in this different space in society where they can open more doors, because if you look it up, men own 90% of the wealth, which is true, and men are door openers. So where men are now, and black men are now in a position to open doors, they are clashing with black women because we were never taught how to walk through those doors and let somebody open it for us. And this may seem like such a simple thing, because when you look at the videos, it's like, okay, just go ahead and submit. But a lot of times women have to protect themselves, their children, and their families in order to just stay alive. They had to serve a different master, which now transfers over to the understanding of government benefits. So now the woman is serving a different master, because that's the person that's coming through to take care of her kids 9 times out of 10. And men aren't able to emotionally open up to women because they could not trust black women back in the day to not tell on them if they were making an escape plan from the plantation, because they had to protect their children. Because as a result, if they did not tell on that man and the master knew that they had a relationship with that man, their children would be sold off, bred, or killed. Stay with me here because it's getting deep. So this boils down to the divide in our culture. This boils down to pride in male culture. And we're not, and don't get me wrong, pride is a part of male culture. Pride is used to protect the foundation that is built. But what are you protecting if you don't have a foundation? You're protecting yourself. So now men are having to protect themselves against women, and women are trying to protect themselves and their offspring from man. Stay with me here. Look up the facts. Okay. So now on both sides, let me see. So now on both sides, now we're both looking at each other like, so who's going to make the sacrifice? Because either side, for example, what do we always hear? Oh, y'all, this is getting me. Okay, this is getting me for real. What do we always hear in these relationship advice videos, especially with black men? We hear, oh, I'm not a simp. I'm not simping. I'm not doing this and I'm not doing that. But in marital culture, and I'm going to say marital because this is across all cultures, usually the man is expected to provide. But since the man in a black family usually never had that foundation to trust a woman in the first place, they do not trust to provide for a woman. A lot of the times, without them having to go through so much to prove that they love them and prove that they, you know what, fuck love, because black men don't value love. They value loyalty, because back in the day, once again, let me reiterate, black men value loyalty and submissiveness because they never got it back in the day, because women had to make sacrifices in order to protect their children. So black men never seen black women as submissive and loyal, so they make them prove themselves. So that's when we go into the stereotype of like the ride or die. And that's where that came from, because a lot of times, you know, it was life or death in these situations for a lot of people, and they had to pick the societal norms or they were going to pick their family. And 9 times out of 10, they wouldn't pick either. They would pick themselves, because they had to protect, once again, women had to protect themselves and their offspring. And man had to protect the social status and pride that they had in order to look like they can protect themselves and actually be able to protect themselves. Okay, stay with me.